Soil compaction can be a big problem in urban settings. We get a lot of development, redevelopment, and the soil gets squished down. I'm here with Cory Herpel from TreeNewal, one of our ISA certified arborists.
So one of the easiest ways to help visualize soil compaction is if you picture a pan of brownies or a cake. It has a lot of big open spaces in between those little cake pieces, those round circles in there, that's nice and fluffy. And then if you take your hand and just smush it, that's what happens to the soil. Basically, you're smushing those pore spaces or the areas in between the soil particles, and it can be severe, it can be minor, and it just depends on the extent of the damage to that area.
Right, so it's hard for a tree root to grow in a soil that gets compressed down into really dense, heavy soil. It's hard for that root to penetrate it. It's hard for water and air to get down to those roots, and the tree needs those things. So when we have that compaction, how does that affect the tree? What kind of symptoms do we see on trees that have compacted soil?
So one of them is just overall lack of vigor. You can get some dead tips. The tree's kind of dying back just from lack of available water and nutrients. Just overall lack of vigor is a pretty good indication. A lot of times you can see recent construction on a property and you ask, well, when was this built, or when was this sidewalk installed?
Yeah, you can also have root loss when the soil gets compacted down really bad. The roots can start to die off, and that contributes to the symptoms that Cory was talking about. You can get an overall thinning of the canopy. You have to be careful with compaction because it can resemble other types of damage that we see on trees a lot. So, sometimes we have to poke around and dig a hole or ask some questions or ask about access for pool construction or something like that. But we're trying to figure out, is the soil compacted? If so, how much of a role is that playing in this tree declining? So when we do see these trees that are declining, then we determine that it's primarily due to compaction. What are some of the things that we can do to alleviate that?
So we have several tools. Just our fertilization process, because it's a liquid inject into the soil in the root zone, that alleviates some compaction because we're poking holes in there and injecting it with high pressure water. That creates some fracturing along those sites, and that'll help open it up. We have a tool called an air spade where we can pneumatically with high pressure go in and poke some big holes underneath that root zone, and we can backfill that with compost or shale or whatever amendment we need. If the area is really compacted, we can use that same air tool and essentially till up most of that root area and backfill that with some organic nutrients and other stuff if we need to.
Right, and so breaking up that compaction helps that air and that water get down in there. It gives us an opportunity to introduce some organic matter down there, which helps resist compaction, and we get an overall happier, healthier rooting environment for that tree.
Right, I always tell my customers, going back to the brownie analogy, that once that brownie is smushed, you can't ever get those holes back like it was, but you can poke holes in that and help with some infiltration and get some oxygen down in there. But once that damage is done initially, that soil will never quite be the same, but we can definitely help alleviate some of that.
Right. It's always best to avoid compaction if you can, but if you do have some compacted soil around your trees, there are things that we can do to help. So if you think you've got some compacted soil around your trees, it's had some construction damage around it, and you need to know what you can do to help it, come see us at TreeNewal.com or set up a consultation with one of our ISA certified arborists.